Hey, welcome to This Life in Tech, the grand episode 180. 20 more, and we'll have the great 200. I'm Jason.
Dan.
And as usual, I'm appalled, and I'm.
Oh, good morning, gentlemen. What's going on?
Hello.
Dan, what's on the front of your shirt there? Let me check it. Get it in the view here.
This is Recorded Future. That's their shirt.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Nice little threat intel company. They do some good stuff.
Cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They're expensive. Yeah. They're expensive, but
they're proud of their stuff.
They definitely put out some good product, but big companies will definitely I say big. If you start hitting around that 50 million in revenue, and you've got customers that you get their PII data from, you should start investing in this. And more so, you want to know whether or not people are targeting your executive suite, and with and they'll be able to detect that also. I mean, and a lot of these people talk about dark web this, dark web that, but really you want to start understanding not just whether or not you're being targeted, but you get to 50 million in revenue. You've got vendors, and those vendors have vendors. This will help you monitor the full supply chain. So all of a sudden, 3 tiers down the line, one of vendors got popped. Well, they very well may have your data as well. You might want to know, because a lot of these breach policies for notification, that vendor only had to notify the one, but they had no obligation at that point to keep going up the chain.
They don't have to notify the extended family, as it were.
Yeah, they don't have to. Not at that point. So, that's where I really see the value in a Recorded Future. I think but you have to have a good third-party vendor management. You got to understand your supply chain and see how things, continue moving down. And then they can also let you know, which is one of the things I loved about it, is let's say you're a relatively local company. You might want to know if other companies in your area were targeted and they haven't let anyone know that they've been breached, especially when you got all the ransomware stuff going on, which was quite funny because at the previous bank that I was at in South Bend, Indiana, we had this stuff, and we could see all of the companies around us that were getting popped by ransomware, and I'm going, well, it's a good thing that we've already patched that particular vulnerability. But I'm like, hey, this is so.
But that whole thing goes back to the CEOs wanting to be average.
Yeah.
Right? When it comes to their IT, nobody wants to grab that disruptive technology. Nobody wants to think, and they won't take the advice largely of CISOs and CIOs internal, and not exclusively. Some tech side of the house leadership, however you define that, has a better relationship and a better ability to articulate that. But the bigger the company, the more politics you get, and they're less likely to go, hey, we got to have this new thing, which is how Gartners and Forresters exist, right? Like, hey, let's go see what everybody else is doing. And everybody else is largely doing what Gartner's doing, right? Because Gartner gives that tech side of the house some measure of indemnity against getting fired.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the crazy part. When you say, hey, we've got this and it's doing it. But that, and people don't want to know, people don't want to let out of the bag that we've been breached, right? And it's when, it's not if, right? So why not work together and create a community like that where it's like, hey, we had this happen, right? And it's great that a company like you were talking about can start to do that and manage that kind of looking outward, right?
Yeah.
Or downward, or however you want to articulate. I think it's fantastic.
If this company had existed back when I was at Homeland or anywhere, in different times in DoD, this would have been like an easy button for me, because my teams and stuff, we were having to do this stuff manually, like, and figuring it out, and basically, looking at a spider graph to try to figure out all the different pieces, and almost like drawing it up on the whiteboard and going, all right, here's this, and seeing how all the dots connected. This is like, it's an easy button. Like, you just got to know, if you know what you're looking for, this is going to help you very quickly. But I mean, I would have been like, this would have been stupid simple in any place in DoD or when I was at Homeland to figure things out quickly.
It'd be interesting to go check out the story of the founders. And were they like you? Were they at some place where they're like, I wish we didn't have to do this manually. And then one of them said, bing, I got a great idea. And they started to figure out how to do it and automate it.
Right.
Yeah, I do know the founders came from a different company and cashed out, but I don't know where they came at before then. Let me, while we're doing, I'll just, it's a good thing we got this whole, Google thing, figure that out.
Well, and this isn't necessarily what we plan to talk about, but this maybe is an interesting line to follow for a little bit. I don't know that I personally ever really put a lot of stock in what the Gartner crowd was doing. I was aware of it, and from time to time you would reference it just to see what was in a quadrant for a particular vertical. But do you guys think Gartner reports and Gartner type stuff is heavily relied upon still? Or do you think the trend is more towards like independent reviews? And like, for instance, there's a ton of stuff on YouTube where you can find like professional level analysis of how a particular technology works and how to implement it, what the problems are, and so forth and so on. You know what I mean? It's more consumable.
The magic quadrant, not so much, but their individual analyst reports, which is really where the subscription comes to value. Those things are really good. Then talking to, like, if you subscribe and you have an analyst, you get access to the analyst. You can say, look, I'm really looking for this type of a product. Tell me about the industry. Tell me about the landscape. Tell me about the ones that are doing something that's new, unique, and it provides value. It saves on my research time. That's where the value comes in. The magic quadrant, I don't give a shit who's in the top right, top left. That doesn't matter as much.
It's a marketing tool for the companies in that quadrant, and but there are considerable now. I was reading a big article this week, and it was just how it's a thing called How CEOs Behave, and that was one of the big things where we were talking about this relationship between, the IT side of the house and the executives, and that constant battle between, hey, you're a cost center, but you also keep us out of danger. So how do we balance how much we spend and all these other things? And so the concept of that young CISO or whatever who's an innovator, a lot of times they're doing the research and they're like, hey, no, this is the newest, greatest thing. Well, they want to be just marginally better than the guy down the street, right? Rather than try to be, in that, to be massively more secure. And it's the old thing. It's like, hey, I can spend 80% of my money to get, to get a 90% answer. And then I can spend everything else trying to achieve that last 5% or last 10%. Well, is it worth it?
Right.
And so, and again, is it worth it if I'm at Homeland or DoD, or I'm at some mid-tier tech company that's not a thing? It's like, it's every business. I mean, you put 5 businesses on the same street, they're all different from their threat profile. Right. And so how do we manage that?
Right.
Dan's locked up in research now.
It's okay.
Well, they're definitely doing a good job of hiding who actually works for the company. I don't always find out, like, why not put the executive suite on the website? Yeah, they don't do that. So,
well, I think there's parallels, which is why I asked. So, like in doing academic research, there's a similar process in where, you kind of have to get an idea of what the landscape is. Okay. And so I have this subject, whatever it is, right? And it's situated in a continuum of time. And there's things surrounding it that some are directly related, some are indirectly related, some aren't related at all. And you have to sort through all this stuff to find what is truth. Okay. And there's 2 ways to go, broadly speaking, in this context. There's 2 ways to go about it. You can do it yourself, and that's fun in some ways, but it's very time consuming and it's at the cost of doing something else, right? Or you can figure out how to use reference librarians, which are really the analog to your Gartner analyst. And man, you find especially a good reference librarian, and man, it can save you a ton of time, because you can just tell them, here's my keywords, here's the subject, you know what I mean? And they'll go do all of it. they'll take that as a search string and evolve it into other search strings, and they'll get all the research, put it all together for you and sort through it, and then you basically get a big package back, and it has everything in it, and you're good to go. So it's interesting how that parallels. I've worked with Gartner when I was at the restaurant company. We had a subscription because we were large enough. And I found it useful from time to time. I don't know how I would consume that relative to today, though. You know what I mean? I don't know.
So the founder was just computer scientist. He's a Swede, and made a good amount of money with one transaction from a previous company, and decided to get into the threat research based on what he was doing at over in Sweden. He's actually sold Recorded Future a few years ago to Eyesight Partners for $780 million, and still remains their CEO as an independent thing. So he's just a computer scientist. He's got a PhD in computer science over there in Sweden. So.
Nice.
Well, and I think, and you guys were kind of talking about this. That's it, right? You just live and experience and pay attention. It goes back to leadership, right? And you see that, well, look, man, there has to be a better way to do this, so I'll just build it, or I'll get people to build it with me or for me. You do that enough times, you're going to find one that somebody else likes too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All true. I mean, it's just it's one of those things of started a company, it failed. Started another company, it failed. Started another company, it failed. Started another company, and I'm making $10 million a month in revenue right now.
Yeah, because you only need one, right?
Yeah.
What's the VC? That's the difference between VCs and PE firms, right? The VCs are early thing, and they're throwing darts against the wall, hoping one of them hits the board. And PE's like, okay, well, you're on track now. Your thing. Let's help you. Let's put the booster rockets on you and let you take off.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's if you can tell it when you meet those. If you meet a managing partners of a VC, their personalities a lot of times are a lot different than the managing partners or the leadership of a PE firm. Right. And a lot of PE firms are a lot more conservative.
Well, in a lot of ways, that's the right mentality or temperament, if you prefer, to do that kind of work, right?
No doubt.
Like if I want a company to grow in a stable way, I don't want somebody that's more innovative and creative. That's a disaster. You want somebody that's more conservatively temperament so that they'll manage it correctly and grow it. And
for the most part, a PE firm is the exact opposite of what they tell you to do in business school, because they're essentially being like General Electric. And so General Electric is nothing more than like the S&P 500. So when they're a conglomerate, and they stay away from them because you have no way of determining truly what your risk is, because you could do horrible in one part and great in another, and you basically stay flat. So now when you get these PE firms that stay in a particular industry and they're trying to eventually package it up and then sell it off as one entity, that's different. But I guess it depends on the PE firm, but it's just because they're so conservative, they don't want to be influenced by the peaks and the valleys of individual,
Right.
business lines.
Yeah. Well, see, and I think it mirrors politics a lot too, even with the terms, right? People get caught up in it has to be one or the other, and they're exclusive, and one is inherently better than the other for some reason. And I think we would agree. Tell me if you don't. It's really just deploying the right one at the right time, given the right situation. I don't think one is better than the other, outside of when's it time to do this versus that. Like,
No, I'm pretty sure one's better than the other. Mine is better than the other.
Is A better than B or B better than A? Well, tell me about at what point in time are we?
Yeah, right.
If we're having this hypothetical discussion, what tell me what this company, this theoretical company that we have, what does it look like, and where do they want to go?
So back in 1842, what way was better, A or B?
Were you fighting the British or the French?
I don't know, Dan. I was young. I was a young professional, and I hadn't been given insight into that level of leadership.
You guys know sometimes I like to sit around and think about crazy shit. Like, remember I told you about the dinosaur thing? Like, it bothers me that we're on the same planet that dinosaurs were. It's crazy. Like, it's less than 200 years ago that people were just riding horses crazy around shooting each other with bows and arrows. Like, in the Wild West, right? Like on the frontier. Hey, I think you stole my cattle. I'm gonna pop you. Pat, pat, pat.
Do you guys ever watch that show Aerial America on it's a Smithsonian channel, I think? It's a great show. It's unbelievably high definition, great videos, mostly shot by drones of all the states, like Aerial America, right? And it's a great history lesson, and it's looking at the country from a different view. And when they get out in the Midwest and they start talking about, there'll be just some foundation, and it was a post office that the Pony Express used, and that was in the late 1800s.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that was still considered to be more efficient than trains in a lot of ways, right? And so then the train took over, and we've talked like this arc of technology and arc of humanity, even in the last few hundred years, that's got us to the point where right now where we have, the greatest tool that we've ever seen in our ability to search the internet and aggregate information at the speed we do. And I think that's awesome. But I also think that it's changed the dynamic of how we view elders.
Yeah. Sure.
Right. Because elders were largely respected and listened to for their age because they'd been around the sun a lot more trips, and you had to go like, let's just hope they've seen something that is of use to me. And you would, because it was laborious, basically even in the, up until the internet came out, it was going into the library and getting deep into the Dewey Decimal System a lot of times. Right. And so what was easier? Hey, there's a guy standing in front of me that's being paid by a university, by somebody to teach. I'm going to listen to him. I'm going to take his fact, what he's saying, until he proves to me that he's a complete dummy, right? Or not a trustworthy steward of my learning, right? Well, now the kids are sitting in class and they're on the internet. Like, how does this work? Boom, they're right there. They're pulling it up. And is that always the right answer? Like, that's the thing. Like, what's the fidelity of the information we're getting? I think when it comes to technical information and things that are zeros and ones, it's relatively assured, right? That you're doing the right thing. But when you start talking about people, politicians, famous people, the social structure of what we do, those things are a lot more fungible. And what's actually true? And do we take the time to think past the first order effect?
If I spend more time now having to research what people say, because they're like, they'll spit something out like, look, I read this on the internet, and I'm like, that doesn't sound true. Now I got to go and fact check everything,
right?
Because almost everything people are saying, I'm like, look, that's just not true. Like, there's this big thing going around the internet now, talking about how a cashless society is horrible. It's a bad idea. It's just more about control, and I'm going, look, if you're worried about that, then invest in Bitcoin. They're like, well, your grandparents are no longer to be able to give their grandkids $20. I'm like, I can't remember the last time they did. They give them gift cards. Like, there's no giving cash. They're like, here's a gift card so you can go do this. But there are all these people having to believe that, look, you're no longer are you going to go get that side job for cash so you can help make your mortgage payment. Hey, how about you don't take out a mortgage that you can't afford to pay? You don't need that side job for cash.
Or don't be a savage and get Venmo or the Cash App.
Yeah, I mean.
Well, check this out, though. It's interesting. This is the way we're kind of going today. What fascinates me so much in a serious way about the pace at which our technology is evolving, and really evolving past our capacity to deal with it, right? So we're in this weird state. I've said this before, like with social media. It's an intermediary towards something. We just can't understand it yet. I think for the first time, if you think about history, for the first time, we've had a major paradigm shift, like in human consciousness. And it happened so fast that we completely bypassed what I'll call the priest class. Okay. So in ancient times, you had a priest or an elder. Okay. This is the transition. And so the priest was the one that could read and write, that had all the knowledge, and they disseminated it through sermons once a week. And that worked because that's when the laymen could come once a week because they didn't work, right? It's the Sabbath. And they got the information and they tried to impart some morality and so forth and so on. Everybody went back to business. And then you fast forward and you're on the frontier. That doesn't work anymore because nobody's building churches. They're too busy shooting each other with 6-shooters. but you still have this concept of an elder, right? And whether it's a tribal shaman or whatever, that archetype is still there. It's only been in the last 4 decades, 2 decades on the extreme, that we've completely bypassed that, and now nobody knows really how any of this works, right? And so we don't really have control over it, and there's so much volume being shot at everybody that you don't really know how to deal with it, and you don't have a priest you can go talk to. It is an archetype, right? It's strange to me.
Jason, if you need someone to talk to, I'll help you out.
I think people do, but I think people do need that, and they look for that, right? And it manifests itself in some very odd ways. But I also think that most folks today look for affirmation, not information.
Yeah, I would agree.
Right, and that drives a lot of, are you an MSNBC person or are you a Fox person? And then people's heads explode on either side if you listen to the other guys, right? And the concept of, hey, I have a way I think the world works, and I'm going to go find somebody who's going to tell me that my way the world works is fine, right? Because that's comforting to people. People thinking that they're part of a tribe, part of that group, and not on the fringe. Most people find that very comforting, right? And they'll stop asking questions and they'll stop challenging themselves, right? And the problem now is, as I see it, is you've got the two extreme ends of thought, right? And those are the ones that people that make money putting stuff on television want to do, right? I mean, it's been said that the single largest mistake that was made when television became the medium that it was, certainly when we were children and stuff like that, is that when the FCC said, yes, you can have access to the airwaves, but you need to do an hour of, again, it was public service programming, but it turned into the news. Mm-hmm. The one thing they left out was, and you cannot make money off advertisements. Because once they did that, then it's about driving ratings, so then we can drive things. So we'll put OJ driving up and down the highway for 24 hours a day until thing. And then we created at that time, there was no court TV. It was at the nascent era of 24-hour cable television, and we need content. I think about 24/7 times how many channels, what's the exponential growth in content that we need, right? Now take that same thing today and go with every social media platform, right? What's the exponential growth in content you need? And at what point does the quality of that content degrade to the point where people no longer trust the basic function of what news was meant to be, right? That a big part of our society being the seams still being all together is that generally people believe and trust in the purveyor of information, right? We did. I mean, everybody, Walter Cronkite, and I can go through history and talk about it. At what point now, at what point today, where's the level of trust in anything? So when you start saying, hey, people freak out about, hey, we're going to have a cashless society, it's because they don't trust the systems of government anymore to be a good steward of the information that could go along with having to provide an ID card, right? Your debit card, having to provide a proof of ID every time you purchase something, right? It's not about the physical transaction or the actual transaction. It is about, do we or do we not as a society trust the mechanisms and the purveyors of information? And the fact that I think that trust has been broken a lot of times, and so it's so fragile, right?
Well, they also don't understand how the financial systems work. They think banks are the federal government.
Well, again, I'll take topics that make me sad for humanity for 1,000, Alex, right? And a lot of those are, hey, people don't understand how the government works, right? People say, hey, good or bad, the president gets all of the acclaim, but he has to absorb all of the bad too. When in actuality, you've got people that have been in Congress for 30, 40, 50 years that come out and they're blaming the guy that's been in the office for three years. And that's on either party. That doesn't matter who's the president, right? And what I think has happened is we've gotten to a point where people of merit right? Great humans that want to help make humanity better and change the course of history for their nation are no longer going, I really want that job, right? Because it's not about doing right. It's about here's the lane we want you to play in. Here's the news we want to hear, and we want it to seem a certain way. And when the wheels come off the cart, kind of like where we're at right now, nobody believes what they hear on television, no matter what, and they run to that one little news outlet. Might not be the truth, but it's warm and comforting. It's the blanket that they did because they're looking for affirmation, not information. That's the part that we're missing right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And in some ways, it's like it strikes me as the power of our modern technology, particularly what we're talking about is the internet and computing systems, right? It has somehow enabled us each individually to be that priest archetype. We have no idea how to integrate with deity. You know what I mean? As priests, if you take the archetype and abstract it out, and so we don't even know how to manage ourselves, and so you end up with this idea that, okay, rather than knowing something and telling people what I know, I think I know what this is, and I'm going to go find evidence that I'm right. And I totally agree.
Right.
And that's not really what the internet is, but that's what it's kind of been made to be. Go ahead.
Right. So, Jason, you may want to start praying because I'm telling you, here's another prediction, and hopefully this one is wrong. President Trump is going to win the presidency. Also, AOC becomes the next president because she will be eligible to run for president in 2024. She will win.
I don't know that I can disagree. Hey, I'll tell you this though, man. I woke up today. So there's a particular band from Sweden, and one of the guys started his own, let's say, merchandise business, but it's like traditional Viking stuff. Okay, the company I recommend them called Grimfrost. Okay, and you can get like traditional stuff, and it's just about celebrating the heritage of the Scandinavian people. And so I got some T-shirts, and one of the T-shirts I have is the big Mjolnir hammer, which is like the St. Andrew amulet in Western Christian faith. It's meant to protect you and stuff like that, right? But it says heathen across the top, and I was going to wear it today, except my in-laws are coming, and they wouldn't take too kind to that.
Oh, I thought they're going to say that you wound up ordering one a little bit too small, and so it'd make you be like. Walking around like this.
Medium.
Yeah.
Oh, I just looked it up while you were talking about it. I like that shirt.
Yeah.
Now I got a new shirt I want.
Yeah. Well, I like supporting that kind of a company too, right? I mean, they're just trying to do something small. I like the dude from the band, and I like supporting that. You know what I mean? It's just but
I'm finding myself not really wanting to support big companies. I mean, taking a look at what they're doing to the overall, the country. Like they're the ones that are contributing to unemployment. Mm-hmm. And it's no different. So, got into an argument with a friend because she was going off saying that this is horrible. We need more stimulus money. We can't live like this. And I'm like, hey, look, why should those people that can work be told that they shouldn't be working? You may be scared, but it's not the government's job to continue to support you, in perpetuity when you're certainly able to work. I was taught have 6 months of expenses in the bank ready to go. Well, she goes off and off and off about, I'm really angry with you saying this. I can run financial circles around almost everyone, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, if you can run financial circles around me or most people, how come you ain't got 6 months of money in the bank? How come you're worried about this? Because then the money you would have received from the government, and you have 6 months, you'd be able to go easily a year.
But is it really about that?
Well, what this person? This person is.
That argument.
I think this person just really, like a lot, they just want. They would prefer to stay at home, have a living wage, and not contribute. That's what I think.
Well, I mean, but even now, like you look at, this argument like with teachers where they want to do virtual learning with kids again, which is, Lord help me. But where you've got teachers like, we're not coming back to work until it's guaranteed. Well,
Yeah.
how did you get to work? Because if you hop in your car, it's not guaranteed you're getting from A to B. Right? Statistically, we've managed risk to a level where everybody feels comfortable hopping in your car. Right? But it's not guaranteed. Right? And and it's like educators is it's high school, and K through 12 I've always it's always been a big conundrum to me, right? Do I think that they need to be paid more? Absolutely. Right? Do I think we need to make public education and the school system into cathedrals of learning? Absolutely. But we're not going to do it without oversight. Right. And that's really what the teachers unions are, and, not all teachers, but union representation over the years. And is the bigger the city, the bigger this voice gets, is advocated for. And the reason that we have standardized testing for students in quite a few states is because the union leadership and teachers have resisted the urge to be tested. Mm-hmm. Right. And like, how dare you question us? We're doing, and I agree. If they say, hey, we're doing one of the hardest jobs on earth because parental apathy really, I think, demonstrates their ability to really launch forth in what they're doing. But you're a doctor, you're a lawyer. My question is always like,
professions have to do continuing education.
Right. Do you think
and get tested?
Do you think that you're a blue collar worker or a white collar worker, a laborer or a professional? I'm a professional. Well, great. Do you want to go hop in an airplane if that guy hasn't been in the simulator every 6 months to prove that he can handle an emergency? Right now, I think back I was already out of high school, but when my sister had to go through, they changed the curriculum, and they went and they wanted to do standardized testing with the teachers, and nobody threw a fit about it. They're like, yeah, let's do it. Well, over half the teachers failed. That doesn't mean half the teachers failed. It means how they administered what tests they were given wasn't a correct reflection of what they should be doing in the classroom. Right. Now, if you're a K through, early primary education, that's a calling, right? People that want to educate young children, for the most part, when you talk to them, there's an outpouring, at least early on, right? Now, let's not talk about what happens when they get older and they're, the system's kind of eating them up a little bit, but there's an outpouring of, hey, I want to do this for children. I'm talking primarily about high school education, where you have subject specific teachers, right? My, TK's grand plan is you test every teacher every 3 years, and they have to take a subject matter test, and they have to take an English test. Because somebody getting graded on grammar and English should never just be an English class, right? You should be well written and well spoken, because if you're not, whatever opinion you have about the work or your life that you're doing, you can't articulate it to other humans, and that's bad, right? But instead, what we do is politicians will only go so far to mess with the unions in this example, or the professional organization that is teaching, however you define that. But they still want to be able to have control, right? They call themselves lawmakers, right? They want to make laws. And so what do? They pass laws that say we're going to have the kids take the test. And then they do the worst thing humanly possible, which, hey, well, when you say you're going to have a child take the test, then you do, and I'll tell you, you tie federal funding to achievement on that test. You make kids good pump and dump test takers. You don't make them thinkers. You don't make them, inquisitive, right? And I think that's the thing. Like there's I had so many great teachers growing up in the public school system in New England that I think about now, right? And as Dan will tell you, I've been out of high school for more than an hour. So I'm getting ahead of you, Dan. I gotta, but that's
a century.
Right. Go ask children for the most part now. Hey, name 2 teachers that had a really positive effect on your life.
Yeah. So TK, serious question. Since everyone's got you, like everyone doing English, what is your stance on the Oxford comma?
I love that. It's like it's the old joke about, it's Hemingway in periods, right? Like this, those short sentences, right? And I think we talked about this before. I had a friend of mine who he grew up just a heart-wrenching life story growing up, right? About just feeling like he was an afterthought in life with his parents and everything else, and was kind of just, really just, it's amazing he's navigated life as well as he has. And he said to me one day, and this goes back a while ago, I was still in the Navy, and we're traveling around, and this is before cell phones and everything like that. So everybody used to bring a lot of books with them because you got to wait a lot of times for things. And so he's like, TK, he goes, what are some of the stuff you read in high school? And again, like I said, I had amazing experience with English teachers in particular, and not being gravitated towards that at the time. They found a way to draw me in to make this amazing to me. And so kind of an introduction to the classics. I said, here, let's go get Old Man and the Sea, Hemingway. All right. Mm-hmm. Don't talk to him or anything like that. About halfway through I believe he should be about halfway through the book or a little bit more. I go, how's it going? Right? This is your first classic that you're reading. How's it going? He's like, will he just catch the fish? Right. And I'm like, he's got you. Hemingway, he's dragged you into it. That's the value of reading, because what you imagine the boat to look like, we both have a rough idea, because he's very declarative in how he does it. Right. It's the difference, the difference in his writing style is he wants to take away from your imagination a lot of the detail of this ship looked like this little boat, the whale, this was this kind of thing. Right. And I said, but he wants you to have and feel the angst. He wants you to feel the true emotion of the character. And in doing that and stripping away, he goes into this massive amount of detail about everything that, and he's like, and he was fascinated with it. How many kids today, and I think public schools do two things extremely well. One, they do special needs programs amazingly. There's very few private schools that would even attempt it, because it's an amazing process to bring a lot of these special needs kids out of their shells to get the most out of them. And they do gifted programs really well. It's 80% in the middle that you're kind of on your own. Right. And I think that, like I said, I don't blame the teachers for teaching the test, right? Or leading. And I think teaching the test may be the harshest way to say that, but shading towards ensuring that test criteria is met, because that's where the funding is. And you said, hey, if you do this, you'll get the money. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's the crazy part to me. Right. I think teachers should be paid more and be considered a professional class above where they are? Absolutely. Do I think teachers should complain about what they make today? No, because when you're in college, you knew that this was what you were getting into. And like I said, if I'm making $5 a month, but I'm doing something I'm hugely passionate about, like I said, can you adjust your lifestyle to fuel your passion? Mm-hmm. Right? Because if you can't, it's not really your passion. Right? It's something you really like doing. You just wish you were paying more for it.
Yep.
True. By large and far, in my direct experience, not only teaching the university system, but my mom was in the elementary school system. A lot of it, the quality of the experience, both for the students and the teachers, particularly even around teaching the test and how that all gets managed, is largely a part of the administration. And so if you have good administrators down to the principal level, right, let alone up to the district level, if you have good administrators, good leaders, shocker, like it's a good system. It's a good system.
It's with everything, right?
Yeah, right. And when you have poor administrators,
I think testing of students should be confined to the subject matter testing of what you're actually supposed to be learning. And you want to fuel people's desire to be inquisitive, mm-hmm. right? That's how you get great minds, right? I don't know anything about this. I think it's really interesting. I want to go check it out. And then you start on this, your personal odyssey, or you'd be like, yeah, this really isn't interesting. You go to something else, right? But you're constantly searching for those things that you find interesting, and hopefully that matches up with trying to make the world a better place. It's on, at some level, right? Whatever that might be, right? And if you want in asking a child to help assess an adult's competency in anything I just think it's a really bad paradigm, right? Go figure out how we're going to do it. Don't tell me it's a big task. I get it. It's a big task, right? And we're asking you to do probably one of the most important things you can do in society is make sure the next generation of humans is not dumbasses.
Yep.
Right.
And it's interesting with the aspect of education. So my middle son, so he was, he's now a rising sophomore, but his freshman year, because he's like, look, I want to take a bunch of computer science classes. And the only way to do that in Maryland is through VOTech. But the first year of VOTech, you have to do all of them. And I thought this was great because he had to do he had to learn about HVAC stuff. He had to learn some stuff about woodworking, metalworking, and then eventually he got to do, computer science as well. And I'm going, I think this is absolutely great. And I said, well, what'd you think? He's like, well, I thought they were all pretty interesting, and I'd like to know a lot more about them. But it's not taking me away from me wanting to do the computer science aspect. I want to do the programming. That's the thing,
right? Because there's exposure, right?
Yep.
How many times in life, right? You have mentors. In this case, we'll say parents, right? Where their advice is about making them look good to their peers. Like that you've guided your child on a path that's acceptable to people that don't matter in your life, right? I've got to show off, right? And you have to go do this. You have to go do that. No, you have to love your kids and help them to fuel their passion, whatever that is, even if you don't get it. Right. And
he also really likes shooting the Kimber 1911 45.
Of course he does. That's a hell of a handgun, right? But that's
I'm trying to get him to do some more, like, hey, let's try to do some competition, because he's pretty good with it.
Right. There's a front sight focus. It's a life. That's a life thought process. It's not just it's what's important. Let's deal with what's important, and then as you walk through life, those things that are far away will become near, and you have to deal with them again, and you have to apply front sight focus to solve those problems. Right? I've talked about this a lot. Like I went to college, to the university my parents wanted me to go to, largely because I wasn't in the business of telling them no, and it's still. UMass Lowell, for the dollar, is one of the best engineering schools in the country. All right. It's always been considered that way. You go to U.S. News and World Report every year, it's like best value for education. It's in that, it might not be number one every year, but it's certainly in the top 5.
Right.
But when I got there, I hated it. Right. I didn't find it overly difficult. It was work, right? It's an engineering course. So it was work. You had to apply time to do that. Right. Not only was I ambivalent about it, because I wasn't passionate about it, it became a job, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't know what I wanted to do. And along the way, I hated the school. I hated the campus, right? Because it was divided across a big river. And so every time I had to go to class, I had to walk across this bridge across the Merrimack River. Well, that's fine on a sunny day, but it's Massachusetts, folks. So from November to March, it snows. And you'd walk over there and the left side of your body would be covered in snow. You'd dry out enough while you're in class, you'd turn around and walk back to your dorm, and the right side of your body would be covered in snow. And so you're also saying to a bunch of 17, 18, 19-year-old kids, hey, we're going to put a lot of impediments in your way about wanting to go to class, right? Physical ones. Now, if you're not passionate about what you're doing in class, how much easier is it for you to say, forget it, I'm not going? And this is pre-internet. This is pre-everything, right? And so when I tell a more complete story about it, I hated the experience, but more importantly, I was starting to hate myself, right? Because I felt trapped. I felt cornered. I didn't know where and how to do this, because I was going to have to make this big statement to my parents that I did not want to do what they wanted me to do. First time in my life, right? And I said around the dinner table, I finally got up the nerve to say, I want to do something different. And I said to my parents, I want to do the classics. And my mother, who, God bless her, would jump in front of a bullet for me any day of the week, but her worldview ended at the mailbox. as a stay-at-home mom,
Mhm.
right? Why would you ever want to major in anything where you couldn't get a job? Right? Because in her head, it wasn't a clean, defined, this, you majored in this major, which is, I love telling my friends at the Garden Club that my son's an electrical engineering major because it sounds important. And you have a path. People imagine a path to greatness. How would they define greatness? There's a clean cut path. But when you tell somebody that my son's majoring in the classics, and at the time, most people are like, well, what is that? But he's going to go learn how to speak Greek and Latin and study history. And like, all of a sudden with that peer group of the thing, it starts to go like this. All right.
Mhm.
Well, what do we know today? That quite a few investment bankers are classics majors, right? Or history majors. Why? Because you have to understand the arc of humanity.
And you have to learn you're learning how to think.
Right. And it's never a bad thing, right?
Right.
But if, think about that now, I mean, from what I've seen, and I've never been to the campus, High Point's a magnificent campus, right? You make it easy for kids to want to run around. Like if they're semi-passionate, they're going to want to get out and get amongst the campus. It's like, I went to Emory last summer for a basketball event for my daughter, and it's an amazing campus. They're doing amazing academic things there. And if you're passionate about anything in the health sciences and you get on that campus, you want to be out and about. You want to be engaging. You want to know the next thing, right? It's that, I call it like the arc of exploration, right? We came out of the cave. We stood up. We thought we invented fire. We went over the hill. We got in a boat. We went across. We invented airplanes. And now we go to space. We're supposed to do that. Right? There should be curiosity beyond the neighborhood. Right? And when I hear people go, I can't believe how much money we're wasting on the space program. I'm like, okay, you need to sit down.
You don't get to go on the spaceship.
Well, no, you're why we can't have nice things, right? Because you're stifling curiosity.
Yeah.
And that baffles me, right? And I don't, it just, today, I think sometimes we get, with the price of education today, you start defining it in what am I going to get out at the end? And, what's the ROI, right? When you get down to it, what's my ROI? Well, where does ROI positive start on higher education?
Right. Yeah,
right. Is it at the community college level where I get certificates and I can turn that around and go right out into the world and become a server admin or whatever other, certificate I want? Do we find it odd today that welders are starting to make a lot of money because nobody wants to go weld anymore? Nobody wants to go work with their hands. It's the whole tradesman thing. That's why I love the idea of that Vogue Tech program freshman year. Okay, you think you want to, as a 14-year-old, you think you want to do computer science, right? But what exposure have you had to anything else in the world, right? Probably not much. And in your middle son's case, it's what you do. It's what Danny likes to mess around with. And so he's the next in line of seeing, okay, here's what everybody does. If you look at college, certainly in the post-World War II GI Bill era, how many veterans or how many people, even up into the 60s, went to college and then they were like, hey, you were there to learn. You were there to expose yourself to things you hadn't thought of before and say, hey, I'm going to start out in one thing, but have taken a completely different path. And it wasn't cost prohibitive, so you could spend an extra semester in school and go, okay, I've got to make, because I got changed, okay, and I got to go do this. Well, now that could be another year of $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 worth of student loans, right? So you're again putting a lot of undue pressure on somebody to say, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life, right? Because that's what we infer about learning now.
That's right.
Right.
It's interesting because so for me, if I could do it over again, my undergrad would not have been in computer science. I did computer science because it was my quickest path of getting the degree, which I needed a degree at that time because I was already a working adult. But I would have likely majored in philosophy without a shadow of a doubt, because I wind up gaining such during my high school years, a passion for how the Declaration of Independence was formed, and read Rousseau and Kant and Jonathan Locke and Descartes and all these folks, and just because, and they're all philosophy. It's all in terms of that, how to think and the aspect of how the social contract, but none of that stuff was required reading for, but I developed such a passion for that aspect of learning and how to think that I would have loved to have done that as my major. If I'm going back in time, I would have still done a computer science master's. I would have still done everything else because I already had the technical background.
There's so many engineering, postgraduate engineering degrees and computers where people were. I look at now. It would have been either major in psychology, because that piece has fascinated me over time, and that's kind of what I do a lot of that now, and talk about a lot of that stuff. How teams work, the dynamics of that, and the philosophy aspect. I mean, Jared, when he went to college, started out as an econ major, and now he's a philosophy major with a minor in econ. Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. And I think that ability to think and to process information and to look at things across the arc of time, right? Because I think we become narrow-minded when we focus on a really small period of time. Right? If you say, well, I'm going to contemplate, what's the president today? Here's how we define the presidency. Well, how do you define leadership back to the dawn of time? Right? Because all, as you say, like that, when we formed our government, having lived in England, every time the Brits would be like, why do you guys do things this way? Why do you guys do things that way? Everything that the system of government we set up was a direct repudiation of the monarchy, right? That we weren't going to have a king, right? And I said, the Bill of Rights, our Bill of Rights.
Or to drink their shitty rum.
Right. Our Bill of Rights. Our Bill of Rights is a direct reflection of what are the top 10 things we don't like about being under the crown? Right? We want we want to be free to assemble. We want to have freedom of speech. Right? And as
Have you read all the Federalist Papers?
What's that?
Have you read all the Federalist Papers?
Most of them, yeah. That's what it is. I find myself, I'll think about something and I'll go into them and look at pieces and I kind of round it out. But it's funny, I dealing with especially the Brits, right? And then Dave Chappelle, hey, the Second Amendment's there in case the first doesn't work out. Right. And you can't quarter troops. You can't be forced to all things that during the days of the crown you were mandated to do. And then we went on and said, hey, now that we've gotten this together as an independent nation, we think these other things are important as well. But it all starts from you need the engineer in the room. You need the engineer dreamer, right? You need the Ben Franklin, right? Who's the stage guy. You need the boy philosopher in Jefferson, right? You need the banker, right, in Hancock, so you need all of that, a well-rounded group of people, right? Well, what do we do today? We try to go find everybody who thinks exactly like us, put a big circle around us, and cancel and delete everybody else from our life that disagrees with us.
Yeah,
if Alexander Hamilton could have checked his ego at the door, we would have ended slavery probably 50 years earlier.
Well, and so I'll tie this together. I got to run and pick up some railings for the deck, but I think this goes back to what you started with, and you started saying it first. I think TK with this affirmation, and confirmation.
We look for affirmation, not information, and information hunters are not relished today.
No, and so if you actually want to fix the school systems across the board at all levels, this is how you do it, because that's what breaks it. You have to change.
Unite the Carolinas. Oh, sorry.
Well, it starts with that, because when I'm the emperor of the United Territory of the Carolina, I can execute this change at will. And I will.
Both of you have a strange fascination to have a scepter and an orb, I've noticed.
Well, I mean, anyway.
No, I don't want it. My right hand would hold it and only give it to me when I need it.
This is how you fix
in person, not my right hand.
Yeah,
I put that together. I'm pretty quick that way.
This is how you fix it, in my opinion. You start by changing the assessment culture, because that's where it's, I think, most embodied in its brokenness. Because we give tests to confirm that you're right, instead of using tests to show where you're wrong, so that we can find the information to fix that. If you just change that little shift in philosophy, it would magnificently transform things.
But if you look at a lot of the way Khan Academy, if you could teach school the way Khan does, I think there's I think it's California, the Green Dot schools in LA, like Drew Carey and a bunch of other fans, they started that and they changed the paradigm of disadvantaged youth. I mean, they turned schools, those buildings from holding holding cells for the adult penal system into teaching kids, right?
Mhm.
I think one of the great ways they did it was they turned the learning experience on its head. So at night, your homework was to go watch the Khan videos on how to do algebra, how to do everything. And then in the daytime, you came in class and we did the work. So the homework, what normally would have been homework where you work on problems, the thing that you would get stuck on, right? And so in saying, hey, I'm going to be around when you're learning to process the work yourself and learning the mechanism, and I'm going to let you get the basic understanding from a video at night. You now, in flipping that system, you've made a much more efficient learning environment.
Yeah.
Well, it's exactly how I taught my undergrad classes, whether it was networking or secure communications. Like, look, you're responsible for reading this stuff. In class, I'm teaching you how to run a firewall. I'm teaching you how to create VPNs. I'm teaching you how to do this, how to do that. I'm not giving over lecture. Your responsibility of reading the material so you understand it, because I'm going to test you on it, but you're also going to have a test on how to set up that firewall, how to set up that VPN.
I think putting the practical piece, and it's when I did networking and stuff like that. There was an amazing guy who was like employee number 6 at Cisco. Obviously, he cashed out, but his passion was teaching networking. And he taught it at night at one of the colleges around here. And I was damn glad to have that guy as, I looked at it more as a mentor rather than a teacher, right? Because he did that same thing. He's like, go read all this stuff, come in, and we're going to make this a practical experience for you, because most people learn better that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And especially the younger kids are, especially the 14, 15, if you get stuck and you can't get through it, then the frustration level grows. Then you put the stuff away, and now you don't want to do it because you don't feel like you're capable of grasping the content.
Right.
All true.
Well said. Well, my friends, I'm off to Home Depot to pick up my custom length railings. So
You should find an independent local instead of supporting the corporation of Home Depot.
The chicken coop was built from lumber out of the forest.
Awesome.
So
in a metaphorical sense, that's true no matter what.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Eventually it all got back to somebody's forest. You just know the one it came out of.
Yeah. Oh, my friends.
Well, have fun.
Thank you.
All right,
everybody
Have a
have a
great
good
weekend,
week.
everybody. Cheers. Bye-bye.